What's up guys, Anthony here. One of the biggest challenges I see with home buyers and home sellers alike nowadays is just a complete misunderstanding of the real estate process itself. You see, if you've ever been involved in buying, selling, or investing in real estate, you understand that it's an extremely tedious, emotional process with a lot of moving parts. A lot of people are involved, many hands have to touch it, and in any given moment, the deal could just fall apart for no reason and then you've lost your house. And on top of that, we use words like due diligence and contingencies and special stipulations and earnest money and escrow. And what does it all mean? Well, you're in luck. Today, we're gonna focus on the process. We're gonna specifically talk about the escrow process. What is it? What goes on during that time? And we're starting now. Hey guys, my name is Anthony Laborde. I'm a realtor here in Atlanta, Georgia. And the word escrow itself comes from a 19th century French word, escrow. And what it meant was a title, a deed, money being held by a third party until a transaction was completed. Well, the same applies to the 21st century. Escrow, which comes from escrow, means a third party. It's basically an unbiased party. It could be an attorney, could be a title company. They hold all the funds, all the contingencies, the disclosures, everything until a transaction is completed. But we're jumping a little bit ahead of ourselves. There's really three main parts of a transaction. There's the fun part, there's the work, and there's the end. Now, the first piece of the transaction is the fun part. This is going to vary a little bit differently from a buyer or a seller, but if you're a buyer, you're getting pre-approved, you're learning how much that you can afford, you're looking at homes online, you're researching schools, job location, drive times, going out and visiting these new homes, you're going to open houses, you're soon realizing that the pics online are photoshopped, but they look great. And then hopefully you find a home that you fall absolutely in love with, you make an offer, you negotiate, you come to an agreement, and now you're under contract. Now for the seller, the fun part is getting your house ready to be staged. You're taking care of repairs, new paint, new carpet, you're staging it. Hopefully you have a good agent that is doing good market analysis so that you're priced correctly and ready to sell. You're getting it onto the market, you're getting the sign in the yard, you're doing open houses. Hopefully a buyer comes along, falls in love with your house, makes an offer, you negotiate, come to an agreement, now you're under contract. Now that the fun part is over and the buyer and the seller have agreed to work together and are officially under contract, the next step, the lender is going to open up an escrow account. Again, this is a third-party account, could be a title company, could be the attorney. They're going to hold on to earnest money, closing costs, disclosures, etc. Everything that has to be done and checked off before closing, the escrow agent is going to take care of that. Now, once escrow is open, I typically sit down with my clients, and again, we walk through the entire real estate process. This closing piece is extremely important because there's so many checkpoints, contingencies that have to be met, timelines that have to be checked off in order to close on time so that you can get your house. The very first item on that checklist or in our timeline is your earnest money. Here in Georgia, you have 3 to 5 days to deposit your earnest money into the escrow account, and it's typically 1 to 3%. Now don't freak out, your earnest money that you put forth at the beginning will be returned at the end of closing, and it'll be a credit either towards your closing costs or your down payment. A piece of advice about wiring your earnest money, if that's the route that you decide to take, the routing information and the account number only, let me repeat, only goes to who you're routing that money to, i.e. the escrow agent. It doesn't go to me, it doesn't go to the broker, goes to nobody else except the escrow agent. There's been a number of cases, especially here in Georgia, where we've had some wire fraud for people giving out their information to people who are asking for it. That's crazy. Seems like a no-brainer, but it has to be said. Only goes to the escrow agent. Now, just as important as knowing the earnest money timeline is the due diligence timeline. This is the first piece of the escrow period, is understanding due diligence. Typically here in Georgia, it's 10 to 12 days. During this time, you want to make sure you continue researching schools, neighborhoods, drive times, crime rates, anything that's of importance to you and your family about moving to the area. Make sure you do your due diligence during this period, because here in Georgia, for any reason whatsoever, during due diligence, a buyer can walk away from a deal. Doesn't matter what that deal is. It drives sellers crazy, but buyers are protected here in Georgia. So knowing when that is up and gathering as much information during this time as possible is key. Now, one item that I take care of as a realtor during due diligence is I order the inspection. Another piece that's very, very important. I make sure that we have a certified, qualified inspector. Typically, this is gonna run $300 to $500, depending on who you use. Now, what an inspector is mainly gonna do is they're gonna look at big ticket items. Now, in their report, it's gonna be extremely detailed. It's gonna make you sound like your house is falling apart. It's not. It's their job to highlight anything and everything, whether it be the smallest item, chipped paint, all the way up to the roof has a big hole in it where an airplane crashed. But mainly what the inspector is going to focus on is the acronym PEACH. We love peaches here in Georgia. Plumbing, electrical, AC, and heating, which is your furnace. Now they're going to look at the roof, they're going to look at your basement, crawl space, structural items, but inspectors protect themselves a lot of times. They don't turn things on or off, they don't flip switches. So they're very limited in what they can do. So it's a good idea that if you have any concern whatsoever about a roof, a basement, a pool, a crawl space, anything outside of the general things that an inspector is going to report on, is to get a specialist on site. You really don't want to find out about these things 6 months, a year down the road, and it costs you $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 or more. Once inspection is completed, the next thing is that your lender is going to order an appraisal. This is important because depending on what the appraisal comes back at, that's what the bank is going to loan you money for. So for instance, if you're buying a $300,000 home, it gets appraised for $250,000. That's a $50,000 gap that the bank is not going to make up for. They're only going to give you the $250,000. Now in that case, let's say the appraisal comes back low. You have three options. Number one is the one that I advise. Have an aggressive agent put together a request to reduce the price. We don't talk to the seller at this point. We have our appraisal, it's less. We put together a request to reduce the price. I personally call the other agent, I send them the appraisal, I send them that request, and I let them know how much we want to be in this house. We love this house. Unfortunately, the appraisal came back low. We would like for you to lower the price so that we can move forward. The seller doesn't have to. They can negotiate, they can ask for a little bit of money on your own, they can tell you to go pound sand, number of things that can happen there. But it's important that we get to an agreement on what that price could be, because the bank is only going to allow or only going to lend the amount that the house appraises for. Now, the appraisal process itself, when an appraiser comes out to your home, and this is a good idea, keep this in mind when you're pricing your house. An appraiser is going to look at a mile radius around your home. You're going to draw a big circle. Within that mile, everything that's closed, meaning it was on the market, it's sold and closed, that's what they're going to be looking at. They're going to be looking at homes that are comparable to yours, same number of rooms, square footage, year it was built, condition, property. They're going to get as close as possible within a mile that's closed within 6 months to a year. That's what they're going to base their price on. All right, now the home's in past inspection, we've had it appraised, hopefully it appraised for what you're paying for. The next step is to go ahead and get your homeowner's insurance. Now you want to do this a couple of weeks before closing to make sure that your lender has this in hand so they can pass this along and make sure you get funded on your house. Coming to the end of escrow, one of the final contingencies is the financing piece, and this is where the lender is going to submit for the final underwriting approval so that they can fund your loan. They're also going to do a title search to make sure that it's free and clear of all defects, and this is where title insurance comes into play. And this protects both the buyer and the seller in case there's any claims in the future that come against the house. Hopefully you're approved through underwriting, and now it's time for the final walkthrough. And the reason you do a final walkthrough is threefold. Number one, you want to make sure all the necessary repairs that were brought up after the inspection are taken care of. You want to make sure that the house is in the same condition that it was when you first initially saw it. And then anything that was agreed upon during the sale, you want to make sure that it's still in the house. An example is a washer and dryer. So if you agreed to keep the washer and dryer there, make sure your washer and dryer is still there. And then finally, the final step is to start preparing your closing costs. Now, typically closing costs for a buyer are 2 to 4%. This is going to vary a lot. There's a lot of different factors in there. Make sure you're talking to your agent, that they're talking to the lender. You should get a statement a couple of days in advance, maybe a week or so in advance, that will list out your closing costs. This will give you a good idea of what they're going to be. Go ahead and wire in those costs, and the reason why is that there's banks, a lot of times some of them can take 1 to 3 days. Some of them do it immediately, but some take a little bit of time. You don't want to be at the closing table. I've been there. I ran into a situation recently. You don't want to be there when the buyer has not funded or has not turned in their closing costs. That throws a wrench into it, and you're now sitting there for a few hours. So in summary, escrow is simply the closing process. It begins when you both agree to work together and you go under contract. It ends at the closing table when everything's checked off, the keys are handed over. Earnest money is simply that good faith deposit, 1 to 3% that you put down at the beginning of due diligence. As soon as you go under contract, that goes towards closing costs or your down payment. Contingencies are simply those items that need to be checked off: the inspection, the appraisal, the finance. And then due diligence is simply that period that begins as you go under contract. It lasts for about 10 to 12 days. That's the time that you get your inspection done. You decide if you really want the house, and then moving forward. Guys, thank you so much for joining me on this video. Hopefully you got something out of it. If you have any questions at all about living in Atlanta, the real estate process, here's my number below. Call me, text me, shoot me an email, anything you want to do. I'll be glad to help you. And in the meantime, if you know anybody that can get some value out of this, feel free to share this video with them, like it, comment, whatever else you want to do. Have a wonderful day. It's great being with you guys. I hope to hear from you. Talk to you soon.